My name is Shireen Sathu, and I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Kyle Wang. I'm also a senior at East Brunswick High School.
My name is Simran Mukhi. I'm also a senior at East Brunswick High School.
My name is Pranav Udeshi, and I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School.
My name is Rishi Mendarata. I'm a senior at East Brunswick High School, and this is our advisor, Mr. Brodman.
Certainly is. Alan, good morning. You doing all right?
I'm sorry, Mac.
I said good morning. Are you doing all right this morning?
I'm doing wonderful. You know, it's the normal. I get to sit here and fret and worry, not because I don't think they're going to do a good job, but because I can't do a blessed thing today.
I was going to do that at this point. Neither can we. I don't think you have to worry. Jocelyn, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Broman. I am an alumni of We the People, competed in 2006, a while ago, a long time ago, at least for me. I currently work on Capitol Hill for Representative Paul Cook of California.
Francine, they need to watch out for the alumnus, right? That's the one you have to look out for. Go ahead.
I'm Francine Engel. I am from the state of Maryland, and I'm a political scientist and a constitutional scholar. And I also work for the Maryland Council for Civic and History Education.
Wow. And I'm Mike Miles from Birmingham, Alabama. I'm the treasurer of Jefferson County. Whenever I say I'm from Birmingham, nobody ever asks me Alabama or Michigan. They somehow could figure out where the southern drawl comes from. But I think you've already met Chris Kenton, who's our fearless leader this morning. We're very thankful for him. You know which one we're doing, but just to give you the trigger mechanism, let me read it for you really quick. Unit 4, question 3. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution provides that state legislatures can determine the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives, yet gives Congress the power to, quote, make or alter such regulations, unquote. What are the advantages and disadvantages of a uniform election process? What responsibility do state legislators, state election officials, and citizens have in maintaining free and fair elections? And finally, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the trustee and delegate theories of representation as they apply to congressional districts? Thank you for all the hard work you've done to get to this moment. Now it's fun from here on. You ready to go? You may begin.
The advantages of a uniform election process include uniformity, providing for better/newer systems, enhanced equality, ease of application and actuation, greater possibility of identifying and addressing threats, greater efficiency, compliance with ADA requirements, and less possibility of confusion. Uniformity actuates fairness, as all states are utilizing the same process, allowing for consistency in educating people on the system and its application. According to the Secretary of the Oklahoma Election Board, Paul Ziria, it creates certainty and confidence in the voting process.
The disadvantages of a uniform election process include the upfront cost. It is easier to destabilize. It might not appropriately address local issues because of its uniformity, and that it is currently unconstitutional. The upfront cost of implementing a uniform election system would cost the national government greatly. The Help Americans Vote Act of 2002 updated election equipment at the cost of $3.9 billion. A single system could intensify the impact of a breach of that system, as it would apply to all systems across the nation.
The responsibility of state legislators in maintaining free and fair elections include creating election districts and approving them in most states, ensuring that election laws are appropriately formatted, creating laws, budgeting for and paying for elections, setting the process and rules for elections within states, and adhering to the Constitution referencing elections. The responsibility of state election officials in maintaining free and fair elections is significant, as it includes interpreting and implementing the rules and policies set out by the laws promulgated by the state legislators, implementing interpretations of courts referencing election laws, and using their expertise to assure free and fair elections. The responsibilities citizens have in maintaining free and fair elections include being the watchdogs on the system, bringing actions in courts, protesting, instructing representatives, and participating to continue to assure the representatives adhere to the rules. During the civil rights movement, African Americans protested peacefully for equitable suffrage, leading to the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Advantages of the trustee theory of representation referencing congressional districts include that representatives tend to be better informed than the polity, voters are not educated on all subjects, districts are so large and diverse that determining a consensus is difficult, and it avoids tyranny of the majority. Congressional districts are generally over 700,000 people, and the congressional district that we live in represents East Brunswick and Trent, cities with dramatically different racial, cultural, and economic backgrounds. Disadvantages of the trustee model include potentially limiting the reflection of the people's will. Representatives might make poor decisions, limiting popular sovereignty, placing the representatives' views above the people's, and representatives might be subject to even more partisanship in this system. In this form of representation, delegates can modify or even ignore some of their constituents' ideas in the creation of legislation.
Advantages of the delegate theory include a better reflection of the will of the people, enhanced popular sovereignty, is easier to discern a majority view in congressional districts, and coincides with the ideals of democracy. The delegate method provides a better reflection of the people's will, since as noted by Professor Emeritus Hannah Pitkin, representatives are mere agents, a servant who will vote the way the majority wants. The disadvantages of the delegate theory include limits on minority rights and views, ignorance of ill-informed voters, inability to identify intent, and complications when a clear majority is not established or when that majority is making a blatantly wrong decision. Since delegates are bound to the majority, if the majority errs, the delegates must adhere to that despite knowing better.
And that's time. Good
Wow,
job.
it came out on a minute. That's remarkable. There's some phrases in that essay that ignorance of ill-informed voters. I snapped my head back when you said that, I guess. I don't know. So which of those, I mean, I wasn't going to go first, but you got me hooked out on the trustee versus delegate. That's the best. Francine and Jocelyn, I think that's the best treatise on that we've heard so far today on that, I think. If you're a member of Congress and you are better informed, you've got access to data that not every person in your district. You may not be there very long if you keep going against the majority and saying, I've heard some stuff y'all hadn't heard. But what is your primary responsibility? Is it to represent the views of the people that sent you there? Or is it to do the best you can to look after their welfare by doing the right thing?
I'd say that the responsibility is to look after the welfare of the people by doing the best thing. I think that our legislators do have the best in mind for their people. And we've seen that for example, in Wisconsin, there was much debate over whether or not to have that first primary election. And if we left it up to the people, I think that that perhaps that election would have been moved. But in reality, the legislative knew what was right and they took action on that.
I would like to agree with Rishi. I believe that their responsibility is to look out for the welfare of their people, because many times they have more information and they know what is right and the best for their polity, and as such they can make informed decisions.
I think that it also has to be combined with listening to the majority view, because while representatives may have the people's best interest at heart, they also have to uphold the democracy in this regard and listen to what people in their districts are saying, what they want to be put forth into legislation. So I do think it's kind of a sort of combination of the two, but I also agree with Rishi and Simran in the sense that regarding their welfare, that's more of a priority.
Seems like it's a lot easier to be a statesman or a stateswoman if you're serving your 5th term rather than your 1st term, if you've had some time to build up. Thank you for that. Go for it.
Going to your statement, how you talked about the difference between state legislatures' responsibilities and the state officials for implementing that, which actually turns out to be more important in our current election system, the state legislatures or the state officials who are basically certifying the elections?
I would say that in this system that state officials are probably the most important fundamental part to our system coming up in the election, simply because of the fact that there's so many unknowns in our system. We don't know how many people are going to show up for voting because of the current coronavirus debacle and fears of infection. We need to make a conscious effort, and state election officials need to make a conscious effort to make voting accessible for all people, because as you know, usually it's elderly citizens don't want to make a generalization, but usually it's elderly citizens that work on polling stations, and it's difficult, and they are most at risk, in fact, in this issue. So I believe that it's up to state election officials to be proactive in finding measures to expand voting in order for people to have a much easier time if they choose to come in to vote, in order to make sanitary voting stations, in order to make voting stations that are easily accessible and comply with public health and safety standards.
Yeah, just to build off of that, I think that state election officials we've seen are more proactive in bringing about these reforms. For example, in New Jersey, for example, the state election official wanted to start having conversation about creating a paper trail for our elections, where in New Jersey currently we do have an electronic form of voting, but that's not backed up by a paper trail. And we're one of only 5 states to not have a paper trail. And one of the reasons that we have that is so that we can track election fraud and voting miscounts. So I think we've seen that the officials are more proactive in bringing about that change.
Francine?
Yeah, do you think there are any voting groups out there that are still disenfranchised? And if so, what is causing this to happen?
I believe that ex-felons are a group that are, for the most part, disenfranchised. And I believe that as people have served the time for their crime, they should be allowed to vote and should be allowed to have a say in our system. Their states have varying degrees of support for ex-felons. Some states allows ex-felons to vote, some states do not. And I feel as if that lack of uniformity in terms of election laws creates a lot of confusion in our system. Why should a felon in one state be allowed to vote, a felon in another state not be allowed to vote? So I believe that ex-felons are a disenfranchised group because they don't have their voting throughout the whole nation. Therefore, I believe that they should be allowed to vote.
I think that another group that has disenfranchised voting would be Native Americans. In many states, we require permanent resident addresses are required for voting. However, some Native Americans live on Native American reservations, and thus they don't have permanent addresses. They don't have addresses that they can provide for authentication or validation. And as a result, they're not allowed to vote in some states while they're allowed to vote in other states.
Another group that's disenfranchised would be, I guess, like non-citizens, but who are permanent residents of the United States. There are some states and towns which allow non-citizens, but people who are permanent residents to be able to vote. But this lack of uniformity creates a lot of confusion between the states.
What does an actual
That's gonna be time, unfortunately, guys.
Right.
Sorry.
Rats. Man, they're getting us warmed up now. Man, that's terrific. Jocelyn, yeah, first of all, it's
Great job,
Great
guys.
job, guys. Yeah.
That was absolutely wonderful. Jocelyn, what you think?
Yes, your statement was wonderful. You actually walked us through a lot of the disadvantages and advantages of the universal or the unanimous system. I can't even use the right words right now. But that was what my next question was going to be, is like, what does a uniform system actually look like? Because you have these questions that we have of like, yes, it could be more efficient, but it could also be more subject to electoral interference and those kinds of questions. So I would have loved to explain that better, but you did a great job in your statement of like lining all of that out. As well as lining up the state legislature versus elected official. And that gets back to the question, and you guys did a great job answering my question, because it's this balance of like, is it better to write the law or to interpret the law? And that's really what that kind of gets down to. I would have liked to hear a little bit more when you were answering my question of examples where election officials may have counteracted the state legislature or where they worked in concert. That would have just made the answer stronger. And also to consider, I'm trying to remember, I didn't follow the Wisconsin stuff as closely, even though I'm from Wisconsin originally, so I've followed it a little bit with what happened on April 7th, but it's more like how did the legislature versus the state officials, like actually, what was that tug of war? So you'd mentioned it, I was kind of hoping you'd have a little way to bring that in as well, but also a great understanding of how officials of interpreting state law is actually very important. And it's not just about what laws are that's written, but how it's going to be interpreted and certified. Also, I'll just mention, since I work on actually Indian policy for my boss, the mention of Native American disenfranchisement and that issue. So just kudos for bringing that up because it's something that you don't always hear about. So thank you. Great job.
Francine, what you think?
Yeah, I would echo everything that Jocelyn said, but I really wanted to emphasize your opening statement. I mean, you hit everything in there. I mean, you just went, question by question. It was very easy to follow. You had the advantages, the disadvantages for everything. So I was just really impressed with how much information you covered in your statement. It was really, really fabulous. And then also, when I asked the question about disenfranchisement, I was kind of expecting sort of the stock answer of, race or income. But you gave me felons, Native Americans, non-citizen permanent residents, and even in your statement, you talked about being more compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you brought up disenfranchised groups that sometimes people forget about. So I was really impressed with that answer. But I thought you did a fabulous job on everything, both the follow-up and the statement.
I really agree with what Francine said. Part of the time with every new group that we meet, about halfway through the essay, you start beginning to think what questions you want to ask because of the essay. And with your essay, I put my pen down and just listened. You hit on so many different subjects and you taught me some things. You included some facts and figures, Francine, in there that maybe we had not heard so far today. So it was fun to listen to that 4 minutes and learn from it. And you gave us so many different things. We hit on a bunch of stuff, but we could have gone 30 more minutes, Chris, if we had it with them, I think, on the stuff. And so the balance between the quality of the essay and the preparedness you had for the questions was delightful. And it's something that anybody else is going to have to run against the rest of the day. The last thing I want to say to you, and Chris Kenton will join with me on this, I think. Chris has been in this program a long time too. There's an old proverb that I think I love in this competition. It says the greatest gift a person can have in life is the gift of a good teacher. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, do you have a great teacher. Alan Broadman has graced this competition in so many ways for so many years. And we're not through with him yet. He's judging next weekend. He's judging the middle school thing next weekend. I always tease him and say who had to go to the assisted living to get him. And then people began to say it was my turn to go get him this year. Alan, we are so thankful for you. Let me tell you all a little secret. He doesn't bring teams up here unless he likes the team, unless he really likes the team. And I sent him a text message last night and said, good luck tomorrow. And he said, thanks. He said, I really like this team. This was a fun team to work with. He was looking forward to hearing how y'all did today. And y'all took him out on a very high note today. I know you made him proud as he has made us proud for a long time.
Good job.
Mr. Broadman, thank you for everything you've done. Bless your heart.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.